Hello and welcome everybody to one of the last Grand Prix reviews actually of our podcast series this season. Once again, I've played with me for the French Grand Prix from this week, round 18 of the F1 and the F2 series in the Ground Effect Racing League. And while the Paul Ricard circuit in Le Castellet in real life isn't the most favorable of circuits, at least by the public, we definitely saw some great races over there, despite the very large runoffs, which multiple racing drivers normally don't enjoy too much because there's no gravel they can push their competitors into. But yeah, as said, some amazing racing, and I would say we just crack on immediately and head over to Division 1. In Division 1, finally, after Abu Dhabi, I think that was it was before round 10 actually, I think round 8 or something, Blade wins once again for Williams and gives his championship basically a second chance now. By gaining on his rivals. Gisa Otto on his debut in Division 1 finishes in second, also after penalties, so he kept his nose clean. Then I've got Rage, who finished in third on the track, and now also the result is in third, but he got the 5-second time penalty, so he could have also won that race if there wasn't some contact we'll come to later. Dressy then in P4 for Williams, a 3-second time penalty cost him a podium, but also by him a great job to basically keep himself collision free, let's say, despite a heart attack moment in lap 1. And we've got Partig in P5. The Hungarian is back after his ankle injury. In P5, solid 10 points for Aston Martin after rain leaving. So he's surely going to be very, very happy with that. Then we've got B4 in P6. He said he had no pace before qualifying, which we saw in qualifying actually, but that was to be expected. Both in the race, not much moving forward, but at least the P6, but scoring his main competitor Sora, who finished in P7 after being collected, I think, by Marco in the McLaren and his teammate for that day, Bourbon Boy. And I've got Marco in P8. He actually crossed the line in first and won the race, but a 10-second time penalty dropped him all the way down to P8, which was costly for him and also for the man he took out, which obviously was Cortes, where we had a nice clip to review afterwards. Then we've got Marky Mark in P9 in the Haas, with Jack Miles on his debut in P10 for AlphaTauri. If we look on the driver standings, we see that Sora is still leading with 252 points, but he's only 12 points ahead of ROM Beeford on 240 points. Then we've got Blade, who's back in the championship fight on 218 points, but definitely needs a good result on the biggest pad track of them all at China in Shanghai. Then we've got ROM Drazi with 164 points, who couldn't really shows full potential recently and is basically out completely of the championship fight now with 164 points. Then we've got Rain on 102. Rage jumps up to P6 in the standings. He's down 84 points, 10 points ahead of J Ninja, who's going to return for China. Then Michael Dale on 71 points, Partik on 67, so he's a good chance to get into those top 6 or 7 at least. And God of Gaming done on 55 points, not scoring any after his qualiban at the French Grand Prix. In the constructor standings, we've got Williams on 383 points after P1 and P4 at Le Castellet. They extend their championship lead and they're getting also close to their first title of the season. Red Bull then on 325 points, sitting solidly in P2, while Mercedes is on 257 points in third and Alfa Romeo on 237. McLaren could have scored even more points without penalties for those two drivers, but they are now on 209 points, basically safe in their top 5 spot. But what could have been if, as said, there were no penalties for those two drivers. Alpine then on 148 points, with Aston Martin on 130. Ferrari pass the Haas F1 team. The Scuderia is now on 87 points with Haas on 78. And AlphaTauri remain on 46 points. And finally, I've got him here at the correct moment. Blade finally race win again. I mean, that must be some relief after the recent weeks.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm finally here as a race winner and not just a fill-in for Dara, basically. So, yeah, it definitely feels good. I think it's come at quite a crucial time in the championship. I still, I'm not too close to Sora, but it definitely helps. I was much further away before this race, so yeah, it's definitely feels great. Obviously, I feel like I've had quite a few races since my last race win that I could have won, but either other people have just had a bit of pace on the day, or the race didn't go my way. So yeah, finally to get the second win of the season, yeah, it's nice, and yeah, hopefully more to come.
Yeah, I mean, I remember we weren't doing podcasts last season, obviously, but at this point, with 3 races to go, last season it was, I believe, Azerbaijan, Baku, round 10, and you were basically in the same spot in the championship. There was basically a big gap to first because the top two were fighting and scrapping basically all season because they had both quite good race pace. And you appear on the scene now. I mean, you definitely scored your race wins last season, and you're once again in that, as you formerly said, kind of cursed third position, probably. But sure, I mean, as said, you were in the position before. Surely there's only one way to move forward now, and that's just full attack mode, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I remember last season, it was Azerbaijan sprint race, and I needed to pretty much win that one to stay in the championship. But it definitely didn't go well with me being put in the wall at lap one, and I don't even remember what happened in the feature race, but it wasn't much better, that's for sure. So yeah,
Yeah,
sprint race next time out. Hopefully the same thing doesn't happen.
yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
because I think yeah, really I need to
how
win
would have
this next
Dara
one.
said last season at Belgium, and how the turns have tabled. I mean, anything could happen in a sprint weekend, and would be nice to see if you could carry over the momentum, obviously, because if suddenly Sora and Beeford have a third variable in the championship fight, really, that would really be interesting. And I'm sure that's not what they want, probably. Um, but after the early dominance of the season from Sora, I think everyone wants to see a third person really going for the title, and I think that's definitely possible at this stage. But the most important thing now is probably a good weekend at China, and yeah, I mean, you also have to say you didn't have the best of weekends last season in that round, but you also have to say Ninja wasn't there, and I didn't have the best of races either. I mean, I got the podium in the end, I believe, but it wasn't really looking that good. And Azerbaijan usually causes more safety cars than China, I believe. So um, I think that's still something to look forward to. What do you think are the main threats, especially if you consider a race win on China? Because it seemed like in recent weeks the grid is very, very close, especially in qualifying. Who do you think is probably the main threat, or the 2 or 3 main competitors for a race win? Are it Soar and Beeford, or are at this stage of the season probably drivers that are even more dangerous considering 25 points on race day?
Yeah, well, ideally, it won't be Sora and Beeford because obviously they were two championship rivals, but obviously we know Sora's pretty much quick at almost any track he goes to. I think I've only really seen him rip off the pace maybe one race in Miami. That's
Yeah.
probably about it the whole season. So he's always a variable, and Beeford's always strong in the race. But with how close qualifying is and the grid is, it might come back to bite him next time out, as it has for the previous couple rounds. But recently Marco has been performing really well. Obviously, he's won on track twice in a row, but with a speeding the pit lane penalty in Zandvoort and nerfing someone off into the barrier somehow. This round,
They
yeah,
exist.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah, we saw two drivers in the wall this time, but both I think it's fair to say that it wasn't those drivers' faults they ended up in the barrier
Yeah,
because yeah, it's certainly not ideal. But I think he's shown that if he has a clean weekend, which at the moment seems like a big if, but he definitely can challenge for wins, and if he keeps it clean, he definitely will be threat. And another one, Cortez. He's been really strong recently. He was the one who ended up in the barrier as a result of Marco, but yeah, he's been really strong. So, and then obviously, as you say, other pad players, especially Rage, I think I'll have to look out for because no doubt he'll be quick like his most races. So, yeah, a lot to look out for. But you have to perform in under pressure. So this will make or break my championship really, whether I can perform under pressure. So
yeah. I
yes.
mean, like the best of them all, Lance Stroll once said, "Oh, Dara's gonna love me for this. Diamonds are formed under pressure, and that's how it's gonna be done in the next 3 weeks." Unbelievable! 21 race season, and we are right at the final stage of it, and can really see who actually is the season three champion. And despite some radical changes in grids, you probably have to say it's the most competitive grid you've ever seen in the Ground Effect Racing League. So we're definitely um, awaiting a new champion because I can't win it anymore, and Ninja can't either. So it's going to be definitely very, very interesting. But enough for the one for now. Definitely watch the race on stream. Dara will be there. I hope Jim will be there as well. Whether he's listening to some Spotify music again and TK is in chat, you'll have to find out. But yeah, definitely tune in because that's going to be an absolute cracker, especially with pet players for this time probably having a little bit of an advantage. But we have to see. I mean, as said, Sora always delivers before usually does as well in the race. So we'll have to see how this pans out. And don't count Razzie out. Maybe he's now only going for the race wins and the Nico Rosberg streak of winning the last 3 races of the season to prepare for 3.5. Over to Division 2, though. Once again, it was Jackster who won. I mean, once again, last time out it actually was Otto who won over at Zandvoort. But now in France, Jackster won for the Alpine team. Amos Delta finished second. They actually had a scrap at the last lap for P1. Distembar, the pole sitter, only in P3. XRP then in P4. So Williams finally picking up some crucial points in the Div 2 constructors. Then the Slappas in P5, slowly losing the points compared to his Alpine competitors, as Laidren on his debut in P6 with Seach in P7 for McLaren, Lloyd only in P8, Omega in P9 and Jesper in P10, making it at least a double points finish for Mercedes, but also Aston Martin and Alpine pick up double points. In the driver standings now, Jackster slightly extends the gap to Distant because Jackster is now on 229 points, 10 points ahead of his teammate Distant who's sitting on 219. Slapbus then on 206, with Otto obviously staying on 157. After moving up to Div 1, Lloyd on 119, with Dan on 90, Clev on 82, who crucially picked up a qualifying ban due to breaking the rules according to the stewards, Delta on 65 points, Seach on 61, and XRP on 25. So even those couple of points he gained this week helped him out massively in the driver standings. Looking at the Constructors' Championship, you can see Alpine are now on 466 points and therefore are the Constructors' Constructors' Champions, that's it, of Season 3 in Division 2. So Jackson Disneybar have definitely delivered all the way through the season, while Ferrari is sitting on 253, so almost only 50% of the points scored by the French team based over at Enstone. as we know since last week's podcast. Red Bull on 214 points, Aston Martin on 206, Alfa Romeo jumped Mercedes because the Italian team, well, actually Swiss team now, because of Sauber, sitting on 190 points, and Mercedes on 176. Haas then on 128, Williams on 110, AlphaTauri on 92, and McLaren at the bottom, like we're used to them, with 71. I mean, first of all, really, I mean, congratulations, really, to Alpine and their constructors' championship. I mean, we come to the driver standings later, but you can't overlook that distant bar and Jackson, despite the despite the rivalry in the drivers' championship, they've really delivered as a team and probably done what the whole Alpine group want, especially looking at overall constructors and specific constructors championships.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's pretty clear to see that they've just had, the strongest lineup, and as I said, as we've mentioned previously, you need two strong drivers to be able to win constructors championships, and that's exactly what Alpine had. They had two of the very best drivers in Division Two, and as a result, they've won the constructors championship with 3 races to go. So yeah, incredible job by them both. I think now they don't have to worry. That's one less thing to worry about, and now they can go all out for the drivers' title. So maybe something off their mind. But yeah, I think it has to be said. Obviously, maybe you could argue if Slapbus had been around, maybe it would have been a bit more difficult. Maybe they wouldn't have won with 3 rounds to go, maybe 2 or 1. But I think still, regardless, they were going to win the constructors, no matter what. So yeah, I echo your words. Very, very well done to both of them.
Yeah, and obviously, as said, looking at the driver standings, Jackson now has this 10 points lead over his teammate Distant Bard, and then we've got Slappers behind them. But I think we both can agree that Slappers is just not having the momentum at this stage and probably has to hope for a little bit of luck coming to his side. But what probably is a little bit interesting is, for example, Slappers sits on his 10.5 penalty points and is probably on quite a safe range at this rate because it's probably a bit unrealistic considering he missed even a couple of races that he's going to get on those 18 license points, for example. On the other hand, I mean, Distant Bart only has 3, so he basically has kept his nose clean all season. Jax, on the other hand, has 12, so you obviously need 18 for the second qualiban. I mean, Distant Bard and Jax have the same gap to the next qualiban, but obviously Distant Bard hasn't received anything while Jaxter has. So do you reckon probably, especially going into these final stages of the season with also sprint coming up, Jaxter also needs to think about not picking up an extra reprimand, for example, at China now, because if you then have 2 races where you just need to be ultra cautious, because if you get another reprimand, this is going to give you a qualiban, potentially at Brazil, the final race of the season. I mean, this is going to absolutely, it's guarantee a massive finish to the season probably, but it's probably not what you want as a driver, is it?
Yeah, definitely not. Not ideal when you're in a title fight and you have to serve a quali ban. Yeah, I think. Well, I think the Jexter and to a lesser extent Bard, but I think Bard has to think about it as well. They need to keep calm. I think, like I said, there's a lot of pressure on these drivers, especially because all 3. I think have to say that even if Slapbus is almost a race win behind, he's definitely within a. He's still in a good shout because one good weekend at China, for example, which, as you said, people say is a pad track. So, if Slapbus has a good weekend and Distant Bard has a really strong weekend as well, both on pad, and Jexter feels like he needs to really push hard and make aggressive moves to be able to keep up and not lose too many points. He could make a careless mistake and, accidentally hit someone off or make a little error and get some penalty points. It's not, definitely feasible. So we'll have to see. I think it's down to the driver in this case, and having the pressure definitely doesn't help them. So it's likely we'll see who performs under this pressure and who kind of bottles a bit. But with how well Jax has been racing, I don't think he has too much to be worried about. So if he keeps his you know head in a good space, he should be able to avoid this, even if I think from a spectator point of view, maybe it'd be a little more interesting to see one of especially if it's a championship leader starting from the back in the final race. It would be quite a spectacle.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, as you said, probably very interesting that China is a pet track, and with distant bar and slappers, we have two pad users in this championship battle, and this could probably once again help the intensity of this championship fight. I mean, they're still, as said, within 23 points, which is already amazingly close, but you always wanted a little bit closer than that, ideally within 10 points. So a P3 could already lose your championship. But for the drivers, it's obviously very, very intense. I think Jackster is keeping his cool recently. I mean, he's been performing well. Said he hasn't put in much practice before France, where he won the race. And his team had picked up pole as well. So even if they steal these points off each other, they're still gonna extend Alpine's lead in the constructors and helping the overall constructors, which probably gonna guarantee them another championship at the end of the season. And I mean, if they could make it a triple, that would probably be amazing at the end of the season. But also, I think, for example, Slappers is an on-assist driver. Distant Bard is using, for example, the traction control, which I think could be quite crucial in China at some of those corners. But yeah, if you time it correctly without the traction control like Slappers and Jackster, I think this will probably also give them an advantage, but also depends obviously on their consistency. I mean, we also have people like Otto and Lloyd definitely not there at Shanghai this week, so probably we'll see another podium sitter like we're used to. We'll just see the classic top three in the championship pick up the podium spots. Or potentially Amos Delta, who performed really well in the last 2 or 3 weeks. But enough from Div 2 for now. Let's head over to Division 3, where once again, it wasn't Esselaham, it was a newcomer. It was Owen37, who won for Aston Martin, with Jobbo in second, finally a podium after some time, with Jam in third, Kiksora in fourth, Beastie in fifth, so an Alfa Romeo 3.5 after the 1-2 last week, Exotic in P6, Esselaham in P7, and then DNFs all the way down, for example, Fionn, the Mate, and some Pikachu. Looking at the driver standings, Ham still leads the championship with 234 points. We've got Job on 168, who passes Asala Jam and is 1 point ahead of him, because Jam is sitting on 167. Then we've got a massive gap to fourth in the championship with Adrian Nolan on 80 points. So the All-Star race tickets in Division 3 are basically all handed out already, with Heated and Kiksora on 71 points, some Pikachu dropping down on 69 points, with Kirti Thomas on 65, William 48, and Wildy Mango on the 39. In the Constructors' Championship, Williams still leads with 349 points, but Alfa Romeo making inroads. They're now 40 points behind only because they sit on 309 points, and maybe Ham and some Pikachu have found their competition now in Jam and Beastie. Alpha Tauri on 235 points, so they still keep ahead of Aston Martin behind on 229, with Haas on 175, Mercedes on 136, Alpine on 135, McLaren on 121, Red Bull on 85, and Ferrari rounds off the table with 54 points. So basically the most important driver probably of Williams in Esselaham finishes only P7, but you have to say, even though the drivers get slightly closer, but isn't the most interesting at this stage, the team standings have also got a second chance in this division, because Alfa Romeo are really performing well recently, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. Ham recently hasn't had the best of races, considering he's won, I don't know, 5 in a row at one point, maybe 6. But yeah, you know, since Ham's struggled a little bit recently, Alfa Romeo have been making quite sizable inroads to Williams' championship lead, which isn't ideal as a fellow Williams driver, but definitely from a spectator point of view, that makes it a lot more interesting. There's actually something to fight for in Division 3, which for a while has just been Hammond Williams dominance. So yeah, definitely makes things interesting going forward. We all know how quick the two Alfa Romeo drivers can be. So yeah, definitely will be I think quite a close battle this one because yeah, definitely they've been performing well recently and have the momentum.
Yeah, especially with Jobo and Jam still having that fight in the drivers as well. So Alfa Romeo definitely have chances in moving up the table in both championships. I mean, also it's quite remarkable that Cham and Tam with Jobo have extended the gap to P4 Adrian Nolan by such a margin, especially as Adrian Nolan isn't a bad driver by any means. I mean, does this just show that they probably don't belong in this division, or is it just at some stage also the confidence that just plays a huge role in racing when you just know you've won last week, you feel again the car suits you at this track. Does that probably play a huge role, and which can probably gain you multiple points in the championship, or is that just the skill of the drivers being a little bit higher than from all the others?
Yeah, it's hard to say, but I think we can't ignore how good Ham's been over this season. He's with how many wins he's had, and obviously Jam the same. He's been very strong as well. So I think definitely they're probably, I think fair to say, slightly quicker than some of the others on the grid. But at the same time, you have to perform at this level. What am I trying to say here? Hang on, I need to gather my thoughts for a second. Yeah, they've been doing really well, and I think Jobbo isn't a slow driver. I think he's been very strong throughout the season as well. But I think especially considering Ham and Jam were in a lower division earlier this season, I think they've just improved a lot over the course of the season, and maybe they've put a little bit more time into the game, or maybe they're just uh, finding the limits in the game a bit better than Jobbo and the rest of the field are. So I don't know. I feel like I haven't really explained that very well, but yeah.
No, yeah, very
Uh,
good point, really, to be honest. But away from the dominance from those three for now, I mean, we've had a debut winner actually. We haven't talked too much about yet. I mean, Owen he also raced in F2 this week, which gonna come to later. But probably good for Aston Martin that they had a reserve in place because it won them the race. Just ahead of AlphaTauri and Alfa Romeo scored, as said, a double top five finish with Alpine in fourth, also with the all-time reserve Kiksora. I mean, is that probably a big surprise, really, that the reserve can not actually fight for the top five, but actually win the race? I mean, not a very familiar name, you have to say, Owen is, and especially to beat Jam and Ham immediately out the box at the French Grand Prix. I mean, that's probably a huge surprise and probably really good for the competitivity of Division 3 as well.
yeah, definitely. I think it's a bit of a statement to come into such a competitive division and win on your debut. I think that's a very very strong performance from Owen. And yeah, obviously Aston Martin doing well in the constructors, and they're definitely fighting for third position with Alpha Tauri. So yeah, definitely helps them out a lot because those points could be valuable in taking that third position off them.
Yeah, definitely, and we'll see how he copes. Maybe he can challenge for a top 10 position in the driver standings in the end, despite joining for the last 4 or 5 races. But I'd say for now, let's join one of our favorite divisions, Division 4, where we've had an Alpha Tauri 1-2 And as Yuki Tsunoda is, I think, trying to smile or whatever that's supposed to be, Krigmit is the first Division 4 triple winner of the season, and that happened in quite a short amount of time. He's beaten his teammate and championship contender Jacob Brown to second. So it's Krigmit and Jacob Brown in P1 and 2 for AlphaTauri. Then we've got Jakub in P3 for Alpine, who actually crossed the line in first, but the penalty cost him the race win and even second place. Then we've got Ronnie in fourth, Jamie Hobbs in P5 only. I mean, he ended up there last week as well, even though this time he actually completed the final lap in proper manner. Jock 951 then in P6 for McLaren. So McLaren, at least in Division 4, sorry, picking up some solid points. PDV2 in P7 as reserve remote banjo. Now replacing Raven West as full-time driver in Aston Martin in P8. Cheats in P9. Maybe that name suits him. We never know. Michael then in P10 for Williams. In the driver standings now, Jacob Brown takes the lead from Hobbs. I think that's actually the first time Hobbs loses the championship lead this season, and he's 8 points behind Jacob Brown, but that's obviously still possible for the Ferrari driver. Jakub then on 144 points, so his championship hopes are slowly disappearing, with Krigman on 132. So the second AlphaTauri suddenly trying to fight for this All-Star race ticket, with Ronnie on 127.5. So also he is in that fight still. And I've got Rex obviously on his 85.5 points, because he still can't finish a race, with Andrew on 79, Raven West on 62, Michael on 56.5, and Dobby still on 48. In the Constructors' Championship, though, AlphaTauri extend their championship lead, obviously, onto 407 points, with Ferrari on 291, McLaren on 233, Alpine on 212, and then it's really close in the lower midfield, with Aston Martin on 149, Williams on 144, Haas 10 behind on 134, and Alfa Romeo on 128. Red Bull looking at this battle from a little way back on 93 points, and Mercedes in P10 rounding off the table with 59 points. I mean, first of all, great result for AlphaTauri. Secondly, looking at the Drivers' Championship, probably not ideal for both championship contenders, that they know they'll start the Chinese Grand Prix, I mean, at least the Chinese sprint race, and the US Grand Prix from the bottom of the field, because they were smart enough to pick up 2 qualibans each.
Yeah, definitely. Not ideal when you're fighting for the championship. I'm sure that if we, for example, if it was just Hobbs who had to serve the 2 qualibans, or if it was just Jacob Brown who had to serve the 2 qualibans, it would make one of their championships a lot easier. But no, they both decided to have ignore the rule book and just not strive properly, basically, which is interesting. I think they were just doing it to make it interesting for everyone else, because I think we could definitely see a couple repeat winners, or maybe even new winners, because it is Division 4 after all. Yeah, definitely makes the next 2 races interesting, and it also makes the championship interesting, because on pure pace, I think Jacob Brown has the edge over Hobbs, but maybe he can't get through the field as quickly as Hobbs can, because it's a different skill entirely. So it will definitely be interesting these next 2 races to see what happens. I think also they'll be at the mercy of the midfield, which isn't always ideal, depending on the division, but Yeah, definitely an exciting two races. I've seen that in the chat, Hops is already not looking great for the his confidence in this championship. He's already resorting to bribery in the chat.
Yeah,
So yeah, um, certainly doesn't bode well for him, his confidence wise. But yeah, definitely these two races throw a spanner into this title race. So yeah, definitely. I think there'll be two very important rounds.
yeah, and especially, I mean, the sprint probably technically helps you because you don't have to start the Chinese Grand Prix from last, probably, unless you just don't overtake anyone and nobody crashes, which is quite unlikely. But I mean, still, a sprint is always a dangerous thing if you start last, I guess, because everyone is just quite aggressive. They want to make as many positions, especially after probably not putting a solid lap together for them in qualifying. And said Jakub, Craig, Ronnie, those are probably the drivers that are going to be laughing at them now because now they've got a huge chance at a race win, or at least a podium finish, and they're also in their little scrap for third. I mean, I think we can both agree that it's very unlikely that suddenly Jakub joins the championship fight. I mean, it obviously would be healthy if he could win uh, all of those three races, but it probably still won't be enough for him to challenge for the title because he basically needs 0 points for his main competitors in Hobbs and Jacob Brown almost every race. But yeah, as you said, maybe Hobbs is better in traffic than Jacob Brown. It's going to be interesting. I think we both can agree that Jacob Brown seems to have the edge recently, but still, I mean, for quite a long time, Hobbs could manage that gap, and maybe he can keep his calm. I mean, as said, the two qualibands for each of them really play a massive role right now. A role right now. They throw a spanner in the works. You probably have to say. But yeah, we'll see how it pans out because you never know what could happen in these last few races, especially when the mental side of thing comes into play. I mean, even Krigmit said he would have given the position in France to Jacob if it wasn't for P1, which already looks like there's definitely some team play going on in the Alpha Tauri team. But Krigmit obviously still wants to get into those top three positions. He's an IT sports driver, so definitely has some pace on him as we've seen over the course of the season. I mean, yeah, we've talked about this already in Div 2, but also here a dominant constructors team. This time it's Alpha Tauri, starts with A as well, but definitely the Invenza based team. I mean, they can wrap up the constructors championship next week in China, but that's probably not what they're thinking of. But you have to say, especially since Krigman and Jacob Brown both joined the team midway season, there's been a real move in the team and they've really performed well, haven't they? Because it's just unreal how they've caught up to Ferrari, passed them, and just stroken away.
Yeah, definitely. They've kind of left the competition in the dust. I think. Yeah, very strong season from both Krigmit and Jacob Brown. Obviously, like I said last time, pretty big statement for Krigmit taking being the first driver to get 3 wins this season. As we've seen, it's not been difficult for the drivers to get more than one win. So to get three is, a bit of a statement. And, 1-2 as well. Definitely exactly what you need when you want to wrap up the constructors. And I think, definitely, I think Jacob will be thinking about the drivers list, but I think Krigmit will be pretty happy to say he could be part of making AlphaTauri the Division 4 Constructors Championships, or at least that will probably happen. I don't want to jinx them and they score no points for the rest of the season or something, but I think that's
Yeah,
unlikely with the
they
form they're on right now. So
yeah they would still need Rex to actually finish the race, which isn't looking very likely at the moment. Um,
Yeah, I think Rex likes his 85.5 points and doesn't really want to get
yeah,
many more. So
I mean,
you know,
Michael was very long around his 54.5, but he's improved. He's got 1 point last week. He's got 1 point this week, so he's slowly creeping away, and maybe can get onto the back of Raven West if he scores a couple more in the last few. But we have to see how the Polish driver does. I mean, he was a bit in the discussion really because he actually was the one who got Hobbs and Jacob Brown those penalties. I mean, he was definitely eager to get those two behind him on the grid for the next two Grand Prix. I mean, you can't really blame him because it really seems like Hobbs and Jacob Brown Essed are the best, but we're not going to start this discussion once more. Let's head over to Division 5 though, where Maka could win his second race of the season just ahead of his championship rival in Heikei. So the two championship contenders are really going at it now, especially here at front. With Paloma in third, so a double podium for Aston Martin, boosted up in fourth, Duncan in fifth, Lewis F1 in P6 on Mercedes with Marsala in P7, RM James in P8 after also qualifying there and picking up the fastest lap of the race, so solid Grand Prix for the Ferrari driver. Gazza Buchanan in P9 with Y2K77 in the Mercedes, making it a double points finish for the Mercedes team. Looking at the driver standings, Maka slightly extends his championship lead to 10 points over Heikki. So Maka is sitting on 209 points and Heikki 199, so very close to the 200 points mark. And we've got Triangular Lemon, who retired from the session sadly, but still sits on 134 points. We've boosted Abi, slowly getting onto his back with 121 points, so he's already smelling the magic gap in between there to also get the All-Star race ticket. With Mashallah then on 95 points in fifth in the championship, and there's a huge battle going on because 5 points behind him we've got Paloma, who moved up ahead of Mashallah's teammate, who's once again 5 points behind. It's Batsy on 85 points, and then 10 points behind them we've got J Street on 75, who couldn't turn up for the last 2 weeks, but he's back in the paddock for the last 3 races. Then we've got Matt on 71 points, who sadly picked up a penalty because he hit one of the Ferraris last time out. And then we've got Gazza Buchanan on 53 points for the Haas F1 team. In the Constructors' Championship, now Aston Martin has officially taken over because they now sit on 326 points with McLaren 263, and the Papayas are haunted by Alpine with 227 points and Red Bull on 211. So McLaren could easily find themselves out of the top 3 of the championship come the end of the season. Alfa Romeo then on 180 points, Williams on 164, and AlphaTauri on 150, and now it's closing down at the back with Ferrari on 128 points and Mercedes and Haas being ex aequo on 126 points. So this P8 obviously gives you a lot of money in the end of the season, but obviously everyone wants to be as high up the order in the Constructors' Championship as well, because nobody really wants to beat the worst pairing in the end of the day. I mean, Blade, you have to say, we always kind of saw in the last 1 or 2 months probably that Heike and Maka are the ones to beat, but now they're really turning on the best game and performing at the top of the level because another top 2 finish for Heike, a race win for Maka. I mean, they're now getting serious, aren't they?
yeah, definitely. They've certainly stretched their legs over the rest of the field. But yeah, good to see Mecca responding to Heike, obviously. Quite important that he got another win because Heike certainly is looking strong these last couple of races and still manages to take P2, which is definitely damage limitation for him. I'm sure he would rather have been on the top step, but I think it's good to see. I feel like these two are quite closely matched in this division. Maybe you could argue closer match than any of the championship rivals in GRL. So yeah, we'll have to see how it plays out. It could I think it's very likely that we'll be able to see a couple on-track battles in these last three races, and hopefully it's nice and clean. But I'm sure that will be very hard racing if they do. So yeah, exciting times for this division.
Yeah, definitely. And also, the battle for third is harping up. I mean, obviously, the midfield battle is way more interesting because the midfield in Division 5 always has just been absolutely ridiculous. You can't predict it, but from their point of view, as Williams drive as well, you could think the Booster probably, even though he didn't have the best of runs recently, still way better than Lemon. I mean, Booster could quite easily now pick up this third place in the championship and therefore qualify for the Ulster race in the end of the season. Do you think that's probably what he's aiming for? Because the top two, they're gone. That's a fact, really. Um, I know it might be still possible, but it's still quite difficult for him. But I think P3 is probably the aim here, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I don't actually know. I think Boosted might actually be mathematically out of this championship, so I don't think it is possible. But yeah, I definitely, when you're not fighting for the win, you want to fight for the best position possible, and right now that's looking for Boosted to be third position. So yeah, as you said, I think he's been doing not too bad these last few races, picking up points here and there. But yeah, like you said, he's certainly doing better than his rival Lemon, who's been on the same points for what seems like an eternity. So yeah, definitely in the battle for third,
Five
Boosted
weeks.
has yeah 5 weeks. That's quite a while. So yeah, Boosted definitely will be has his eyes set on that third position. Uh, and obviously he will be rewarded if he does manage to do it with a spot in the All Star race, which definitely will be nice to race against all the other drivers in other divisions. I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously going to get rewarded with 100% wet Singapore, but no. But yeah, he's doing a solid job. A P4 again, probably the best he could aim for, as especially Paloma recently. He's also been stepping up his game, so that's great for Aston Martin, obviously, who could really extend the lead, couldn't they? I mean, the 60 points, 60 to 70 points ahead now, compared to the nearest rivals McLaren in the Constructors' Championship, which is amazing because at one stage McLaren were like 40 points clear, and Aston Martin have easily made that up. So this is great because I now can stop my recording because Beefheart has joined the party.
Shit.
Now we can continue our speech about Division 5 as Beeford again has left the party. Um, yeah, so as said, Aston Martin has a massive lead in the Constructors' Championship in Division 5 currently, which, as said, we didn't expect at the beginning of the season, but not only if you look at the driver standings, but especially in the midfield and low end of the Constructors' Championship in Division 5, it really looks like it's everyone's game still because Haas is on 126 points, but they can still, with a good run of form in the final races, catch up to Alfa Romeo in P5 with 180 points. And I think that just shows how close Division 5 is still and how they can probably still save their season because a P5 finish definitely isn't a bad season in the end. It isn't perfect, obviously, but definitely better than a 10th right now. I mean, it's probably one of the closest division considering the midfield and low end of the pack, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I don't even know whether there is another division that has every team over 100 points. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, looking very close. Obviously, as you said, Haas could probably even get to the likes of Alfa Romeo in this season, which would be, I think, is quite a task to do in 3 races. But certainly the points difference doesn't look that big. And if there was a little bit longer in the season left, you'd say definitely it's possible. With 3 rounds left, though, I think yeah, they Haas and Mercedes, obviously tied for last place, can definitely get to Alfa Romeo if they get a good run. But also, I think it would require Alfa Romeo to have a little bit of bad form in the next couple of races as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously it will be difficult because Mashal and Batsy seemed to have some solid form recently, but yeah, we'll have to have a look on how this pans out. I mean, as we said, we've got a championship fight up top, then we've got a championship fight also for third, the last spot in the Ulster race, and obviously the midfield is a big mix. So anything can happen really, and definitely suggest to having a look at this division because in the end, it's those divisions and races or championships that can really be crucial for the overall constructors in the end because you don't only need the top divisions to perform, you only need the lower end divs. Which still has a great pace, obviously, but you still need there to have some driver scoring points for the team, which could be pivotal in the end. But for now, I'd say let's move over to Division 6. And in Division 6, we saw P Apex winning for the first time this season at France for Haas. Then we've got Viatex in second, Kel in third, GRL Echo in fourth. We're going to come to him later. Rockingham in P5 for Alpine, ARL Bob in P6 for McLaren, 10th Cannon in 7th for the second Alpine, so a double top 7 finish for Alpine. Ifa Ed in 8th, Ladlow in 9th, who's second in the championship, and Flying Luge in P10 in the end. Looking at the driver standings, one guy will definitely be relieved because Echo has finally wrapped up this championship and is the new Division 6 GRL World Champion in the Drivers' Championship. So I'm sure he's going to be relieved to finally wrap up this season 3 title. Behind him, we've got Ladlon, 154 points, so already over 100 points back come the last 3 rounds. So he'll at least try to maybe minimize that gap to make it look a little bit better. While behind him, it's still very close because 10th Cannon on 143 points is only 11 points behind. We've got Viatax moving up into P4 in the championship on 134 points, JTL on 131. Allium UTD on 97, Panda on 89, Flying Illusion 79, Ace Sky on 60, and Dubs Gamer on 53. Before you continue talking on this, we'll still have a look at the constructor standings though, because Aston Martin's the lead with 329 points, but Haas really continuing the charge through the field with 311 points now. So they gained a bit with Apex's win and Echo's P4, but still aren't quite there yet. So they're 18 points off P1. Then we've got Mercedes on 260 points, Alfa Romeo on 247, Alpine on 244. Then we've got the huge gap to the low end of the standings really, with Williams on 112, which is probably not really what Blade wants to see as a fellow Williams driver. Then we've got AlphaTauri 107, Red Bull on 106, and McLaren on 102. While Ferrari still have a gap of around 20 points with 84 points only, so the only team with less than 100 points on their score sheet. I mean, now let's do what we do every week. Let's praise Echo, and now especially because he has finally wrapped up the title, and I think we both can agree, like we said last week, it was quite clear that he will win this title at France, but he definitely has done it in some fashion. He took the lead off the start, finished in P4 in the end. His teammate won, which is probably happy for him. But yeah, his season was it was magnificent, wasn't it? And highly deserved.
Yeah, definitely. He drove an incredible season, extremely consistent, as we've been saying all this time. I think really it's the kind of performance you'd expect from someone in a higher tier, in a higher division, because although, maybe he hasn't had that outright pace at times, he's been so consistent throughout the whole season that, yeah, it really reflects, I think consistency and being able to perform at every single track every single week is a characteristic of a really strong driver. That, like I said, you'd normally expect in a very high division. So, yeah, obviously a lot of praise for Echo in that regard.
Yeah, and as I also said previously, I mean, the battle behind them is really starting up now because Callum Ladlow, 10th Cannon, Viatex, JTIL, they're all really, really close. And as I said, there are not too many places for that All-Star race because we obviously have 3 for the top 5 divisions, which makes it 15, 2 from Division 7, which makes it 17, and another 3 in Division 6, as said. So very interesting. Out of those 4 drivers, the 2 Aston Martins, 10th Cannon and the Tax, will make it for that. Be Tax, for example, has had a great run of form. Callum Ladlow always has been consistent, a bit of a downfall this week. Then 10th Cannon, it was up and down for him. And J-Tubbs also has always been consistent, but this time he somehow picked up penalties that were quite unneeded, really. And this drops him down into 5th in the championship. So I think we both can look forward to a very intense fight for those few positions in the last few weeks of the season. I mean, if we look at the team standings again, you probably have to say with now Apex joining the Haas team after not having the best of weekends last time out in where have we been? Zandvoort, sorry. They really look to still pile up the pressure on Aston Martin, especially with Jay Tilton and Callum Ladler both at one weekend not performing. They are they immediately to as said put on the pressure, and I think at least in the constructors championship we can really await a very interesting championship fight for the last 2 weeks, because I think with Apex and Echo and Callum Ladler and Jay Tilton we have 4 front runners fighting it out for the constructors championship, aren't we?
Yeah, definitely. I think with Aston Martin obviously only scoring 3 points this weekend, it really closes the top of the Constructors' Championship up. I think Aston Martin. We know how strong their lineup is, but they can't really afford to keep having weekends like the one they've just had. Obviously, Haas now, like you say, with an extremely strong lineup. Um, yeah, definitely they can't keep having scoring only 3 points because that lead will quickly diminish with 3 rounds to go. So definitely they need to keep looking over their shoulders. I think that's the next. Now Echo's won the drivers' championship. The next championship that's to play for is the constructors, and yeah, we know that usually Callum Ludlow and J Tob are a very strong lineup. They've been doing well. Obviously, this looks to be a bit of a blip in the results, but yeah, certainly, I think with the addition of Apex, regardless of how well Aston Martin perform, it will still go down to the wire because of how strong the Haas lineup looks. So definitely, we'll be looking out for this battle in Division 6.
Yeah, definitely, and that's I think where we can leave it. I mean, as said, the 2 back-to-back wins for Haas in the end. Last week it was Echo, and this time it was Apex, who really could show Echo that he's backing him up in the Constructors' Championship. And I think we can really enjoy that. And Haley's going to stream that for us, so Division 6 is going to get streamed in the last third of the season, really, to show that those drivers definitely have some great potential to maybe attack in the higher divisions probably next season in 3.5 or even in the big season 4. But I would say for now, let's head over to Division 7, our final F1 division of the week. In Division 7, it's Bright won once again. Well, once again, it was about time for him to keep his championship hopes alive. Orgasm finished in second after penalty removal on the 3/10 off the race winner. Kieran then in P3, making it another race with damage limitation. Then Rio, the new joiner, in P4 with Rangers in 5th, so a double top 5 finish for McLaren. Browns the Buns then in P6, making crucial inroads on McMessy and Matthew in the drivers. FGB 24, after returning to GRL, this time in Division 7, finishes also 7th for Aston Martin, so also Aston Martin pick up some great points in the constructors. Then we've got Static in P8, Sedman in 9th, and Sparky, despite being over a minute off a Sedman in the end, which those two seem to be tough rivals right now. He at least picks up a point to make it also some damage limitation. In the driver standings then, Kieran obviously still leads since Jack pretty much left. He's sitting on 244 points with its Brighton 208, so the Ferrari driver still piling up the pressure behind the McLaren. Orgasm then on 156 points in a safe third place right now, with Browns de Bonds on 119 points and now up to fourth in the championship, jumping both McMassey on 117 points and Matthew on 114.5. So those two really have had a shocker in the last few weeks. We've got Spud Racing on 67 points. He couldn't carry over the momentum from Zandvoort from his podium, and sadly had to retire from the session. And for good measure, he also picks up 2 qualibans for the next few rounds, which isn't ideal for the Williams team. Then they've got Terrific Game on 65 points, sitting in P8, so maybe he could attack the Williams driver, considering those penalties in the last few races. Marley then on 50.5 points, the pole sitter actually from France for Haas. He said he hates the track and he's basically a Mazepin, but Mazepin didn't get pole, so Marley takes that point with pretty much happiness, I assume, especially as he sadly retired from the race very early on. Then we've got Rangers on 45 points, who gains on the Haas driver after P5 finish. In the constructor standings, the final F1 constructor standings of the week, we see Ferrari at 376 points and McLaren at 352. So despite its bright winning the race, Ferrari couldn't gain anything on the Papaya team, who with a third and fifth place finish score exactly the same amount of points. Mercedes then on 207 points, with Aston Martin on 196, creeping on the heels. Alpine on 168, with AlphaTauri on 151. And then back down there we've got Red Bull on 109, Alfa Romeo passing Haas with 101 points, while Haas is only 1 point behind. But Williams with the 90 points, and the Spud Racing needing to make up places and points in the championship. Surely no team to be counted out of this just yet. I mean, the championship here changes slightly over a week, doesn't it? I mean, it should obviously, but now he had a horrible weekend at Zandvoort. Nothing really did go to plan, but it's bright. Fights back in France and wins, and probably gives his championship the last and very much needed push, because the time is running out for him.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's done it in typical Bright fashion, you know. He's one race he scores barely any points, and then the next he wins. So, like, kind of like how I predicted it to happen. He's yeah, gotten full points, which he definitely needs if he wants to take the title with only a few rounds left. I know that qualifying was very interesting, especially with some people forgetting how to drive around half the track and cutting a couple corners to get back to the pit lane a bit quicker. I don't know whether it's Bright or Kieran are affected by them, but if one of them has done that, that could be quite crucial because obviously that results in a quali ban. So I can't remember what the stewards report said, but definitely not ideal if one of them do have a penalty. And yeah, I think, like I've said previously, these drivers want to avoid silly mistakes like that. You know, you don't want to be picking up penalties. That's definitely one way to make winning a championship harder than for yourself. But yeah, we'll see. Like I said, it's Bright obviously taking the win, but the ever consistent Kieran takes third position, which yeah, not probably not as big inroads as you'd hope for after winning the race. So yeah, we'll see how it plays out in the last 2 races. But I think if Kieran looks to keep this consistency up, it'll be quite difficult for Bright to to be able to bridge that gap.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and I just put the calculate out, and to be honest, if you ignore pole and fastest laps, because that's obviously hard to predict, but if Kieran finishes on the podium of all of those races, and it seems like himself, it's Bright, his championship rival, and Wagasm seem to be the quickest right now. If he finishes on the podium every race, basically nothing will happen to him, because he has this 36-point lead. And I doubt that its Bright will get all pole positions, fastest laps, race wins, and the sprint race win in China. Otherwise, that would be a massive charge from Bright, obviously. So Kieran obviously has it all in his hands. He keep it consistent and also play it safe in some sort. But obviously, should be cautious because, as we said, it's Pride got almost all his points from race wins, and that's where he dominated like no tomorrow. So that's definitely gonna be interesting. Also in the constructors standings, I mean, you have to say it's also difficult for Ferrari because McMassey really seems to have the worst form he's ever had in this season. And especially if it's Bright doesn't deliver, as we could see this week. Kieran finishes third, okay, that's 15 solid points. And then also Rangers picks up fifth place. I mean, this is what probably at some stage, especially if it's Bright, is losing the interest after probably a bad result in the Drivers' Championship. This could really make or break Ferrari's Constructors' Championship as well, can't it? Because it's still very close there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we know its Bright is prone to a few mistakes, so if he has one more race where they score no points, and obviously the current strong McLaren lineup, you can imagine Kieran probably taking advantage, or at the very least being on the podium, and obviously his teammate now scoring quite a few points for them. Um, yeah, it could definitely, within one race, all of a sudden it's swings in McLaren's court. So yeah, I think Ferrari will be hoping McMessy can come back and have a couple good performances for these last three races. We know he has it in him because he was at one point third in the title race, I believe.
Yeah.
But obviously it hasn't quite worked out for him recently, and yeah, hopefully for Ferrari's sake, McMessy can come back and get a couple more points because I think they might need it if they want to win the constructors.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's where we can move on for the overall constructor standings, which this week I haven't forgotten actually. Where Alpine now lead with 1,688 points. So once again, they score over 100 points in 1 week. I mean, the French team is just unbelievable this season, and if they win it at the end of the season, you can't blame them because they've just done such an incredible job. As they've already won a single constructors championship in Division 2 this week. But they didn't score the most points this week because Aston Martin outscored them actually. That's why they're sitting in second in the championship because they will not score the team in P1 because Alpine are now on 1,609 points and therefore within 80 points of Alpine. Then we've got Williams in third with 1,536.5 points, so they're around 70 points behind Aston Martin, with Alfa Romeo on 1,427, still sitting nicely in fourth position. Then McLaren, after a really good weekend for them, which could have been even better if there weren't some penalties in Division 1, as said previously. They're sitting in fifth now with 1,376.5 points. Then we've got Ferrari in sixth, the team that was leading the overall constructors for the first couple of rounds into the season, and now only in the lower midfield with 1,352 points. Mercedes then in seventh with 1,327.5, so they are still looking at least P5 in their championship, while Red Bull behind them is rather looking backwards now as they sit on 1,283 points and are in danger of getting passed by the smaller sister team of AlphaTauri based at Faenza, who are now on 1,235 points. And in P10, as we are quite used to recently, Haas on 1,119.5 points. So they brought us the first driver championship of the season, but couldn't quite convert that to a amazing team's performance. Yeah, I mean, you have to say Alpine once again. I mean, over 100 points, just amazing. But Aston Martin are really keeping up with them this week, and if they can continue that into the next 2 weeks, if they can score like a couple more points, maybe in each division, this is going to be a very interesting battle come the end when the stewards and the admins get out the calculator to crown the overall constructors world champion.
Yeah, I think yeah, very strong weekend from Aston Martin, but sadly for them, they only gain about 3 points on Alpine because we know how strong the Alpine outfit is. They've got you know some of the strongest lineups in almost all divisions. So yeah, we'll see how it plays out. I think to be honest, I can't really see Alpine unless, uh, some of their bigger scorers like Bard and Jackson decide not to put any effort in, which I'd be very surprised because they're both in a title fight. But yeah, I think definitely they're looking good at the moment, and that what is it about an 80-point gap? I think 79-point gap.
Yes,
It's a pretty sizable gap. I think Red Bull scored the least amount of points this week with 42.
I think so.
So
Yeah, that
yeah,
was
if
even
you
worse than
assume
us.
that yeah, yeah, not ideal for Red Bull, but if you assume that the lowest Alpine's going to score is around 40 points, maybe a bit less, and Aston Martin score about 100, they'll still be trailing them by a couple points. It's definitely possible, but with how strong both lineups are, I can't really see Alpine dropping that many points. But you never know. We'll see. It would be
Yeah,
quite the coincidence if all of the Alpine drivers one week do incredibly badly, but it's definitely possible. So yeah.
yeah. You probably can agree that if Aston Martin wants to have any chance, they rely on the fact that Alpine doesn't score plus 100 points every week, really, don't they? Because that's just not something you can't, as Aston Martin, say if Alpine scores like 105 points every week, we score like 120 because 120 is a massive amount. That's almost well, yeah, that's around 5 race wins. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, unless Aston Martin has plans to get a 1-2 in every division, then yeah,
Yeah,
that gap's not going to come down easily. And yeah, like you say, I think they'll be hoping Alpine will trip up a bit. So
yeah, maybe the good thing
yeah,
also is though, because as we said, Alpine won the Div 2 constructors, but in the other constructors they're always around third, fourth, so probably there isn't too much pressure. And for example, in Division 6, um, they are in the championship fight, which is quite intense with us, so they really need to deliver there. So there's some pressure. In Division 5, they still lead by quite a margin, but obviously the other teams could come back, so there's a little bit of pressure as well. Maybe not as much as in Div 6, but probably those things play a role as well. But yeah, I think we have to see and wait how this pans out. But what do you think of Williams? I mean, as said, you still are in it technically because it's not too much. And as said, if Alpine has a bad weekend, you're within 100 points, and as soon as you're within 100 points, it's basically on again. But what do you think as a whole Williams team? Do you think you need to work closer together to put in the practice hours to really challenge for the title, or is it slowly time to accept that Alpine have probably done a better job over the course of the 21 race season?
yeah. I mean, 150 points is a lot of points. But as you say, it's still definitely possible to call those points back. Yeah, I think I don't know. Considering we were leading at one point, it is a little disappointing. I think we can all say to have slipped down to third, but I don't think third is a bad result either. Definitely. So yeah, I'm pretty sure everyone here in the Williams camp has ambitions to do the best they can for the team and for themselves, of course. So I think it's safe to assume that we're not going to go down without a fight, but it will be difficult to catch the two cars ahead. I think Aston Martin aren't too far out in front of us, but
Yeah, that's
Alpine definitely.
that's it.
There's a big gap with Alpine. So
Yeah. So
yeah, I mean,
everything down is really the midfield fight. So basically no man's land almost. Not really because you're still 70 points behind Aston Martin, but definitely yeah. And even if you don't win it this time and get the P3 curse, I mean, you're probably gonna beat the Williams next season, so hopefully they can
yeah, of course, yeah, yeah. I mean, I've got to win one of these times, surely. It can't be my fault because I've got one constructors title, and I'm about to get another potentially. So,
Oh
you
yeah,
know.
good point. Yeah, you've picked up the trophies for Williams, but yeah, that's the overall constructors for this week, and yeah, let's hope Alpine get a challenger, and hopefully Aston Martin and Williams, and the midfield gets together even closer. Yeah. So let's head over now to our favorite division. to Division Formula 2. So France, that was a difficult weekend, wasn't it? Because Gibson wasn't there, for example. That was good because we had
Yeah.
less speeding in the pit lane penalties.
Yep. Yep.
We also had Owen and Jack Miles joining, as did Sinks Motion for the F2. But you got pole position, I believe. Yes.
Yep. Yep.
By quite, well, not too big of a margin, but yeah, you had it
I
under
think.
control, I would say. But yeah, I mean, it was easy conditions. Cloudy it was it over at Le Castellet. How was your pole lap, really?
Yeah. Pole. That was good. There was time in it, but I still managed to pull up the pole. I think my gap was about 3.5 tenths. So not too bad, I'd say.
A solid lap, yeah, another pole
Yeah.
position to your campus.
Yeah, 2 points. Lovely, lovely 2 points as well.
I
So
mean,
always
in the
good
sprint,
to get those points.
it wasn't planned to be wet in the middle of the race,
Yeah,
but the weather forecast, yeah, wasn't exactly correct in the end because it was raining in the end, while some people, just like you and Dara and Distant Bard and some others, stayed out on slicks. Well, for example, I pitted for the wet, and in the end, it was almost, well, the wets were quick in the end, but if you stayed out on the slicks, you didn't lose too much time, especially if you were a front runner. The gap was just too big for the guys behind to catch up. So we saw Dara win from Blade, who decided to pick up, I think, 6 seconds of time penalties
yeah,
from
not
Distant
ideal.
third. Definitely not, but still, I mean, that cost you in the end full points. I mean, that was basically the first thing that cost you full points for the first time this
Yeah,
season. Then Jack Miles in fourth, Owen fifth, myself had to main sixth on the wet tires. Owen was the top wet tire runner. Sinks Motion on P7, Penguin in P8, Torpen in P9, and Kill in P10. Looking at the feature race though, this was fully dry. But yeah, I mean, it was a mix of soft and hard tire runners at the top again. I mean, Dara had a great start with his soft tires. Then it was, I think, you and I think Distant Bard on hards. Same as myself and Sinks Motion with Owen. No, Owen was, no,
yeah,
Kel wasn't soft. I'm sorry. I think Owen
yeah,
was on hard as well. So is that an interesting mix? And actually, you have to say, if we saw also a very interesting strategy because, for example, Sync's motion started on the hards, but I think pitted lap 4 from the hards to the softs. I mean, that was definitely some interesting strategy, wasn't
yeah, definitely. I think that's the tire whisperer strategy because I would not want to pit that early for the soft tires, especially in F2. They tend to chew the tires up a bit quicker, I think, than Formula One. So yeah, pitting that early, I thought there was no chance that Zink's motion would make it to the end of the race, but to my surprise, he did. Although it didn't really matter anyways, because he had about 5 million penalties, I think. So yeah, not great, but obviously, yeah, I think the winner was Jack Miles, right? So
Yes.
he had a good race. Yeah, it wasn't it was a good battle with him and Dara. Obviously, Dara on the alternate strategy, but Dara picked up a time penalty, which yeah, let me back through, obviously, but yeah, I tried to go for the overcut whilst Jack went for the undercut, and I thought that Jack's tyres would degrade pretty badly, and that I'd be able to easily cruise past both Dara and him at the end of the race. But I think, to be honest, well, obviously with Zink's motion as well, the tyre wear was a bit better than I think, well, certainly better than I expected. And
You really
so I think,
expected, yeah. I mean,
yeah,
they were, we say better than expected. He finished the race on 94% tire wear. Um,
yeah,
but yeah, he could keep up with Distant Bard. I think it was not that much the tire wear, it was more just the tire deck that was not too high. So, and the cooler conditions as well probably kept the tires in a window. So many people enjoyed them in. I mean, yeah, you still finished in second. Solid race for Campos again. I mean, Jack Miles won obviously the fastest lap. So good for the high-tech team. And Darren third, myself in fourth, and Distant in P5. He dropped behind me after having an interesting battle with Sinks Motion. He was frustrated afterwards in the paddock, to say the least. I mean, Owen in P6, Jacob Brown in P7, Penguin in P8, Torpen in 9th, and Sinks Motion after applying all his penalties drops down to P10 with his 12 or so Lapple softs. And yeah, it's a couple of weeks ago since we looked at the standings, but I think it's time to do so again. Let's start with the Constructors' Championship because the Virtuosi team leads with 635 points, while MP in second has 547. Then we've got Campos on 317, Preyman 243, with Charouz, the reserve team, on 164 points. We've got VAR on 134, with ART on 110, and then at the low end, we've got Hightech and Carlin level on points with 87 points, but Hightech got a crucial race win from Czech Miles, which puts them in 8th in the championship with Carlin in 9th. Then we've got Trident on 77 and Dams at the bottom of the table with 37 points. Now looking at the driver standings, obviously Blade leads with ridiculous amount actually of 406 points to his name. So he leads compared to Darrow 327. We've got myself on 302 in third, Distant on 269 and Gibson on 238. With Nathan best of the rest with 85 points. It's Bright on 62, so he could potentially get the Prima driver with Browns the Buns on 59, Valkyrie on 56, so did S-Game. He's also on 56 for the ART team. I mean, yeah, it looks like you can probably wrap up the championship next week. I mean, it takes some luck as well with the drivers around you. But yeah, overall, you have to say this, considering you joined late, the season has quite gone your way, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Very happy with my pace in F2. Obviously, I think I came into F2. I think my first couple of races I was a bit off the pace, but I kind of understood the cars better as time went on, and definitely the setups. There was a lot of time to find the setups, and obviously, after that, I'm at where I am now, leading the championship, which definitely with I think we could. I think it's fair to say that our F2 grid is one of the strongest in any league. So it's a nice feeling to be able to be leading some really strong drivers in this field. And yeah, hopefully, I think next time out in China, I think my aim will be to hopefully wrap up the championship there. But obviously to have some fun. I always look forward to the F2 races. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'll give it my all. I'm sure that you and Dara and the rest probably would rather I not give it my all and put it in the wall. But yeah, I don't have any plans to do that. So yeah, um, definitely I think F2 at China will be interesting, especially with that long back straight as you mentioned to me earlier. A lot of side by side action going into the hairpin. So yeah, definitely
Yeah,
looking forward to the sprint as well, starting from well, hopefully towards the back, but not the very back. If I invalidate my lap, that wouldn't
10th
be ideal.
ideally.
Tenth, yeah, but yeah, we'll see, and hopefully, obviously, Jack as well will join again because he seemed pretty quick in the race. So he can maybe make my time a bit more difficult up front as well. So yeah, we'll see how it plays out. I'm very excited.
Yeah, definitely. I think Adam Reed's going to stream that again. So if you want to see a potential championship win by Blade, and it's going to do donuts all around Shanghai, or me continuing my feature race misery, really.
Oh.
18 feature races with, well, actually more. I think around 20 feature races now without a win.
Yeah,
Can't
you
believe
still got
it.
over 300 points.
Yeah, looking at the statistics from myself, actually, um, 2 poles. That must have been right at the start of the season with 5 podiums, 3 fastest laps, 4 sprint wins though, and 3 fastest sprint laps, and
Yeah.
72 gained positions. I mean, if we look at the gained positions, I think Virtuosi definitely didn't have the best qualifying. For example, I'm only second with 72 gained positions on level with Gibson, while Dara is first with 100 gained positions, and you played on 61. Obviously helps if you start from the front at the feature race. Penguin then with 26 and Distant Bard with 25. I mean, you also have to say in the constructors it's still quite close, but probably looks like with Josie has this under control now, especially as Gibson now missed 2 or 3 rounds, and probably you're not the only one who can celebrate the championship come next week. So definitely gonna be interesting. But yeah, to finish this off, I would say let's quickly head over to what awaits us next week, which is the Chinese Grand Prix, the predestined pet track, you have to say. But we also saw already with some times that people like Thor and Beeford still will and can be very, very competitive. I mean, what do you think? Do we have to look out for? Whether it's special drivers or track characteristics or championships, what do you think? What's going to be things that we have to look out for considering GRL for next week?
Yeah, well, I think China will be an interesting weekend. I think I don't know whether it'll be good for overtaking. I think the middle sector obviously is quite. I don't know whether technical is the right word, but it definitely isn't too many overtaking opportunities through there. But obviously, then again, you have the very long back straight. Probably, I don't know whether it's the second longest on the calendar, but
I think it's the
yeah, I don't.
second longest. I only know Jeff always mentioned that it's like 1 kilometer long or something. I think it's
Yeah.
shorter than Mexico, but longer than the Camel Straight around Spa. So
Oh, okay. How about
mhm.
Baku? Does Baku not count, or
Oh yeah, yeah, Baku might be longer then. Yeah, it's
yeah,
definitely within the three length longest straights. That's it. So
yeah,
true.
yeah, definitely. Well, obviously, of overtaking opportunities down the back straight, and into the hairpin, of course. Uh, yeah, obviously it's a sprint weekend, so more points available than usual, 32 rather than the usual 27. And
Yes.
I think for those who are a little bit further behind in the championship, I'm thinking mainly myself. Yeah, I think people like me who are a little bit further off but still have a chance need to make the most of next weekend because, as I said, a lot of points available. It can really make or break your championship at this stage. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Definitely, like you say, known for being a pad track. I don't know for sure. I'm not too comfortable around there on pad, but I think time will tell. If it's a pad 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the race, then we'll know it's a pad track. But yeah,
I think we both can agree that there needs to be some payback for Canada, definitely.
yeah, definitely. Canada, and there was another one that wasn't great for pad. Either way, Canada was definitely by far the worst, and I hope I won't be qualifying last like in Canada. So
Yeah,
yeah,
second to last.
second to last, yeah,
Oh well,
alongside a fellow pad
and
driver.
Mexico
Yeah,
was also one of the ones where
yeah,
pads weren't
yeah.
favored really.
That's very true. Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, I personally, I think China could be quite good for overtaking. Actually, I mean, obviously in Division One, it's always a bit of a different story because I think we might once again have quite a long DRS strain. I think it could break
yeah,
earlier than it did at France because
yeah.
yeah,
I think
I mean, in
yeah,
China
with
there
the long
aren't
straight.
actually
Oh,
there are gravel traps, but yeah, there's also I think probably more room for error. While
yeah,
in
yeah,
France, if you cut the corner, you actually might gain time. While in China, it's a bit bumpy off road, so that's going to be interesting. We have, for example, not only the hairpin in at the end of the third sector, but also at the end of the first sector, we've got a hairpin, which I think, especially at safety car restarts, could prove to be an interesting overtaking opportunity. Or,
yeah,
for
yeah,
example, the snail corner, really, turn one. where you have basically different lines, because I think a little bit faster is actually if you go wide into turn one, but if you have a car on the inside, that car probably won't let you rejoin the racing line then. So well, it'll be interesting whether drivers try to choose the better racing line, or just the actual defense or racing line actually on the inside. So that's going to be interesting with different lines, which we saw in the final sector front. Maybe it will happen again in China. As said, in the middle sector, it's probably a bit tricky to pass people, but it can definitely, if it comes to pile up, that probably triggers a safety car as well. So it's going to be very interesting. And I mean,
Yeah.
at the top division, we obviously have the most talented drivers, but you never know what can happen in the lower divisions, like Division 7. Maybe drivers like Spud Racing and Rangers with collar bands can suddenly appear around the podium position because they just kept their nose clean. I mean, probably not Spud Racing. He's not the best of keeping his nose.
He'll be on the podium before, and then the last 5 laps will happen, and he'll suddenly not be on the podium.
Yeah, we can actually have a look at the outstanding penalties before we finish this off. I mean, Spud Racing, Rangers, and Alex Xbox, great game attack, have quali bans in Division 7. So if you aren't the best qualifier in Division 7, you probably find yourself high up the grid than expected, at least for the sprint. Then in Division 6 and 5, we actually have no outstanding penalties to serve, so those drivers can all fully go at it. While in Division 4, we've got the two championship contenders of Hobbs and Jacob Brown with collar bands, and also QT Exotic in the Haas. So yeah, maybe for people like Andrew or oh Big Boy, who aren't on the top end of qualifying pace, maybe they can get some solid points in that race with Jacob Brown and Hobbs needing to fight themselves through the field. In Division 3, we've got Fionn with an incident with Ham last week, also with a qualiban to serve for the Mercedes team, so that's probably not what they want. And in Division 2, we've got Omega and Clever, the two GSR drivers, to serve qualibans. While in Division 1, we only have Optical to serve a qualiban for Haas. So Haas got actually 3 qualibans this week. This probably won't help their championship, considering the overall constructors. Yeah, and that's pretty much this podcast wrapped up. I mean, thank Blade once again for being here. I mean, it was definitely an interesting weekend. He was his race winner finally, about time.
Yeah.
I expect the same thing for the next 3 weeks to absolutely make this championship interesting in F1. I'm sure he's going to try his best, and I think at China the chances are quite high. I heard the pace Dakota is quite solid as well, and Brazil isn't your best track, but it's probably around the top 5 or so, as I've seen her racing there as well. And you won the Division 1 race last season as well, I believe. So you got some pressure over there. I mean, even though the grid was a little bit different, but we have proven to go 3 wide there as well. So yeah, we'll see what happens over in Shanghai after we get out of the aeroplane with some jet lag, and we'll see you over there. And let's say until then, it's goodbye. See you there.